Thank you all. My name is Jack Collins. I have been a resident of Old Lyme for the last 35 years, and it's my pleasure this evening to moderate tonight's conversation. It's not really a debate because there will be no rebuttal. I wanted to start off by thanking our co-sponsors, the Lyme-Old Chamber of Commerce and the Lyme's Youth Service Bureau, and the event this evening is sponsored by Lyme.com. Before I introduce the candidates, I wanted to discuss the rules with you. There will be an opening question to each candidate, which you see printed on the program that you have. It's the softball question of the night, which is, why are you running for the Board of Education? The candidates will be allowed 1 minute for response. Additional questions will be posed to the candidates, and they will be allowed 90 seconds or 1.5 minutes for response. In closing remarks, the candidates will each be allowed 2.5 minutes to respond and provide their closing comments. It would be helpful if the audience refrained from applauding, cheering, screaming. I know you all want to support your candidates, but I think the candidates would be best served if that did not happen, except for right now, because I learned before the meeting that each of the 4 people sitting in front of you, I believe, have never run for public office before. Is that correct? Correct. Suzanne, is that, you weren't there at that night? Okay. We all very much appreciate their willingness to throw their hat in the ring. It's not an easy thing to do, and we appreciate all the time that they're willing to invest. So I hope you would join with me now in applauding their willingness to do so. And now that you've got that out of your system, I hope you don't do that again until the end. In the very front, we have 2 very able timekeepers, Vicki Lanier and Rich Shriver. They both participated in last week's debate. I know Vicki worked as one of the timekeepers, and she and her fellow timekeeper were very efficient. They will tell the candidates how much time they have to respond to various questions. The last response is a stop sign. To the extent that the candidates are unable to comply with that request, I will gently urge them to do so. Before we start the debate, we pick numbers by lot out of a hat or something like that. We don't have the candidates selected in any particular order. We ordered them 1 through 4. It just so happens that the 2 Republican candidates on the left and the 2 Democratic candidates on the right, which suggests that we do something rather unusual in Old Lyme. Each of the candidates does not know the questions, other than the first one. I did not know the questions until they were just handed to me. And indeed, I did not participate in formulating the questions, so I'm simply going to give the questions to the candidates in numerical order, which means Suzanne will start with the first question, and then that means that Steve will start with the next question, and so forth until we get through the end. With that, perhaps if we could have our initial response to the opening question, that would be great. But before we go there, Suzanne, I just want to point out 2 people that are not here tonight. Lorianne Panzera Griswold is not able to be with us tonight, and Jennifer Miller is not able to be with us tonight for different reasons. Jennifer had pre-approved plans to be out of state, so she's not with us here tonight. And if you give me 1 moment. I'm sorry. And Lorianne was not able to be here for personal reasons that I will address in the statement that I will read on her behalf. And with that, I invite Suzanne to respond to the first question, which is, why are you running for the Board of Education?
Thank you. I'm running for Region 18 Board of Education because I think that the board and the district can benefit from my perspective, my experiences, and my professional skills. Most people know me, think of me as a Mile Creek mom trying to get people to pull plants and weeds and to plant daffodils in the inner courtyard, or a Duck River Garden Club working on McCurdy Island, or now I'm a soccer mom. But before starting to raise my children here in Old Lyme, my professional career has spanned broadcast journalism, working as a legislative aide for a United States Senator, managing communications for life sciences and chemical companies, from plant closures and things blowing up in your face to trying to sell and brand products, mergers, acquisitions, downsizings, the whole gamut. So I'm now working as an environmental outreach coordinator with Connecticut Fund for the Environment. We're trying to help the town of East Lyme, the residents there, save the Oswegatchie Hills that they really don't want to be developed by a developer that owns them. I chose to run for the Board of Education last February and March when I was covering regionalization as a story and also watching as a concerned parent as the pre-K discussion advanced.
Hi, I'm Stephen Wilson. I am running for the Board of Education because I have served on school boards before for my children's school. We moved here in June of 2019 so that my children could attend school here. My son was very drawn to the engineering program. My daughter quickly followed after she took a tour of the school and sat through classes. She has dyslexia, and that was a big concern for us, but the concerns were well addressed by the school itself. I have a technology background, which I hope to bring to bear at the school, and you know, I care about value in our budget and providing excellent education for the students, a good platform for the teachers, and to serve the residents of Old Lyme well.
Thank you. Since moving to Old Lyme in 2010, almost 10 years ago, I can't believe it, and we moved here for the schools, I have served on the board of directors of several groups: the Junior Women's Club, Connecticut River Lacrosse Club, known as the TICS, and the Old Lyme Children's Learning Center. Currently, I am on the board of directors for LYSB. After years as a room parent, coach for my daughter, producer of musicals for my son, it's time to serve the greater student body of our town. I do see the main priority of the Board of Ed to provide the highest level of education for each and every child in our community, and I feel I bring a unique set of skills to the Board of Ed as a litigator and the parent of two amazing teenagers who are here who have benefited from the Region 18 schools. I'm finished listening to the rumors and the misinformation around the town, and I want to be a part of the decisions for Old Lyme. Thank you both to the LYSB and Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you. My name's Jason Kemp. I'm running for Board of Education because I've always had a passion for education. It was a possible career choice at one point, and I've continued my interest in it despite not pursuing that. I also have 3 children in my household in the schools here, from the center school preschool program, as well as the middle school and the high school. And I believe that I'd be an excellent candidate for the Board of Education. Through my job as a family relations counselor with the state, I work with families in the court system, and I'm used to really balancing competing interests, taking a look at finances and parenting schedules, and when emotions are high, and moving forward and helping people keep a focus on the children, which I do think is what the main role of the Board of Education will be for. Thank you.
Thanks, folks. I also have 2 additional statements in response to the question, why are you running for BOE? The first is from Jen Miller. And Jen says, first, I'd like to thank Lyme and LYSB once again for providing our town this opportunity to hear a bit about the candidates for our Board of Education and some of their thoughts on current topics. Secondly, I'd like to thank everyone who made the effort to attend tonight. Unfortunately for me, I had long ago made plans to be out of state this week. I decided to run for Board of Education only this summer. Honestly, I never thought I could put in the time necessary to be a good representative for our communities. I am blessed to be in a position now where I can commit the effort required. I decided to run for the board for a couple of reasons. One, I want to bring a more methodical approach to budget decisions, and critically, budget planning. Second, I am baffled by my own lack of knowledge about school board actions, especially major decisions. Increasing open, transparent communication with taxpayers about our schools is critical, and I pledge to you that it will happen if I am on the board. The additional opening statement that I am to read to you tonight came from Lorianne Panzeri Griswold, and it reads as follows. Good evening, Old Lyme residents, family, and friends. Unforeseen circumstances keep me from being with you this evening. I regret that I cannot tell you in person what a joy it has been to serve the needs of the young, disadvantaged, and most vulnerable members of our schools and communities. I believe my years as an advocate for these individuals has taught me about effective communication, integrity, social awareness, assertiveness, creativity, and empathy. I hope that you give me the opportunity to be of service to your children and the community by electing me to the Region 18 Board of Education. Thank you. And with that, since Suzanne had the opening statement, I believe, Steve, you get the microphone for the first question, and each candidate will be responding in full to each question. So, Steve, the first question is, what do you see as Region 18's greatest strength and its greatest need for improvement?
Well, the first part is easy. The greatest strength of Region 18 is, is the curriculum. As I said, my children are new to school here, and they rave about the fact that they have so much freedom of choice in what academic pursuit they can decide upon. They spend the first week or two of school speaking to the guidance counselor about what classes suited them best, and they both are very interested in math and science, and were amazed at the fact that they had such great choices that really were tailored to them. And again, the engineering program is fantastic here. The Maker Lab is must be 2,000 square feet, where they have all the equipment that you can make anything you can imagine, which is a tremendous draw. But the high level of academics, the high testing scores for choosing the college that you want to attend afterward are great. And I honestly don't know if I can really list the greatest shortcoming. I think that one weakness perhaps that I've heard is that we could have more transparency between the board and the community. I think that the community is the driving force for the school. And again, I haven't served personally, but I would like to see that the community has a big voice in what happens with the schools ultimately.
Sarah, and I should tell all the candidates, if you need any question reread, please tell me. I'll be happy to do so.
Would you mind?
Happy to do so.
Thank you.
Sarah, the question is, what do you see as Region 18's greatest strength and its greatest need for improvement?
I see as Region 18's greatest strength at this time, the diversity of opportunities for our students, whether it be in the arts. A large number of our students are engaged with Mr. Wilson, Mr. Picard, Ms. Wind, Ms. Glad, and down to the elementary in musical instruments or choral singing. Again, both of my children certainly have grown immensely with it. If you're not a musician, there are sports. There are many different kinds of sports, and we collaborate effectively with other towns and regions if we don't have that sport to offer. We make those things available to the students. College preparation, walking the children through, at that point they're teenagers, through getting ready to go to school, or entrance to military testing scores, tests that are offered at the school if that's something that they would like to do versus the traditional college route. I will piggyback a little bit on my Republican friend's comment. I think transparency is tough. But I think that through this process, I have learned that there's a lot more ways to get the information if you seek it. Do I think we could make it easier on the website? Probably. But the information is out there, and so if somebody wants to get the information about what's going on with the Board of Education, it is there. You can ask questions and be a part of it.
And my answer on the greatest strength is going to be similar to everyone else. I mean, this is an excellent town, an excellent school system that does draw families into town. I've met, as I mentioned, I have a daughter in the preschool program. I've met 4 other families in the preschool just in the past couple weeks that have moved here this year because of the schools, 2 from out of state and 2 from out of town. I think that there are so many opportunities in this town for such a small town, and that's really excellent that the schools have been able to provide that. So that would lead me to the greatest need for improvement is the declining enrollment. It's something that I think that the school system and the superintendent and the Board of Education have been working on by advertising to draw more families into town, which I think is an effort that is working, as well as drawing even tuition-paying students in through advertising, which is working, but that's an effort that we need to continue. Well, we're able to offer many services, but with the sharing with neighboring towns, but at a certain point that'll become more and more difficult if the class sizes keep dropping. So I think that's something that we need to continue working on.
Yes, I would agree with my fellow panelists that our strengths are our facilities, our people, the human capital, the teachers and the staff that we have here, and we have to make sure that we continue to keep them motivated and on track with everything that they need to handle when it comes with education and testing today. I want to make sure that our children still continue to have fun as they learn, that it is a life learning experience that is not test. And I don't think I'm seeing that here, that the problem with the testing and trying really, teachers are really trying hard to make it a total learning experience. Some of our challenges, or you could call them the weaknesses, yes, the town size, frankly, and the state economy. We are going to have to continue to look for ways to attract people to our community. I think keeping our taxes low, as well as keeping our school system efficient, is a very important part of that, as well as the diversity that we are able to provide in programs. One weakness that we know we have is our own lack of diversity in this community from the standpoint that we need to make sure that our children feel supported. Not everybody is a wealthy student in this town, and the children in this town need to recognize the rest of the state and the rest of the world and where we fit into it. I worry sometimes we're a little too isolated, but otherwise, it's a wonderful town and school system to be in.
Thank you all. Sarah, I think you're next up to go first. And the question is as follows. If elected as a Board of Education member, you will be on a subcommittee. Which board subcommittee do you plan to join and why?
I believe that if given the opportunity, I would be interested in serving with the facilities committee. There's policy, communications, and facility and finance. I believe a lot of what initially drove me to want to be on the Board of Education was hearing issues, people complaining about different things and not knowing stories. I'll say the elephant in the room, the turf fields versus tennis courts versus this, and I think that the facilities and what I've gotten to know in this investigation process and preparing for hopefully this term is that the Facilities and Finance Committee is doing a lot long-term. They are planning, they are saving, they are investigating to do exactly what is most fiscally responsible for the town, as well as what is the best for our students, either excuse me, health-wise or for the buildings, for their recreation. So I think that I would love to be a part of that, to see the schools expand over the next 4 years and help make some of those decisions.
As a member of the Board of Education, I'd be more than happy to serve on any subcommittee that is in need of an additional member at that time. I agree with Sarah, facilities and finance would certainly be very interesting and something I care about as well. I think, given the choice, I'd probably like to be on the policies subcommittee, which I believe is part of the communication subcommittee as well. I think in my role, having I am a lawyer, I don't practice, but I'm admitted to the bar. I think that background would help with policies, which I know are often dictated by state legislation, as well as looking at that, balancing that with the needs of the town. I think would be something I'd be good at. And then as for the communication part of that committee, I also have looked at the controversies that have arisen. It seems there's a lot of complaint in the town about feeling that people don't have all the information of what's being discussed in front of the board. When there's a vacuum, there tends to be a lot of misinformation. And I don't think that that's really the fault of the board per se, but I'd like to offer some more opportunities on how information can be provided in a straightforward way in one location, so that people can be more aware of what's going on. Thank you.
As I mentioned at the beginning in the introduction, I'm most interested in helping with policy and communications. I guess if you work with chemical companies where things blow up and you have to deal with mergers and downsizings and changes, it's in my blood. I want to help people communicate. And the challenging thing for us is communications today is two-way. Quarterly newsletters and publications have a place, but interacting with people, making sure that they in the community feel heard and get their questions answered on a timely basis is more challenging for everybody because we're always dealing with this all the time. But that's reality. So we need to address that. We also need to make sure that all levels, ages in this community stay engaged and supportive of the school system. I was around when the votes went down on the high school renovations. So I've lived through that. It's fascinating to reflect back and look on that. We have so many opportunities to collaborate with the foundations and organizations that we have in this community to make us unique. I'm not sure private school in a public setting is the right brand anymore, honestly. I think we need to look at that again. I think there are better ways to talk about our attributes and build a sense of community here, whether people are paying to go here or are truly living in the town to go here. But we need to foster our school community and make sure that everybody feels like they're on the same page and that they are heard in the decision-making process.
Please excuse me, but I wanted to say three committees because I have a little bit of something to add to all of them. With communications, I'll keep this brief as possible. Communications, I was communications governor of the Old Lyme Country Club for 3 years, which is a full term, and what I worked on was improving our communication with the members. I know that I've only been with the school since September, but trying to understand all the different facets. There's abundance of information, and it's not really very straightforward on how to get to it. So I would like to streamline that and make it easy to have sort of one point to look to get everything that you need to know. The Facilities and Finance Committee is, I think their biggest job to tackle this spring is replacing John Rhodes, who's retiring, and he's responsible for facilities and technology. So I certainly, with my technology background, have a lot to add to that. And the Learn Committee is more, I have an opinion, I don't have a lot of experience with it. My daughter has had dyslexia since, we learned about it when she was in 3rd grade when she started reading books without pictures. So I have a personal interest in seeing that benefits the students. I think 17% have some sort of learning difference, and that's a big percentage of the school, and I would like to see that those students don't get overlooked by our committee.
Thank you very much. Jason, you finally get to go first. And the question that's posed to you, Jason, is what should our school district be doing to address the challenges of declining enrollment?
I did discuss that a little bit earlier with the greatest need for improvement, but I'd be happy to elaborate a little bit more. As I said earlier, I think that that the advertising, I know there's been some criticism of the slogan, also criticized, but either way, the idea of the advertising, it seems that it is working, it is helping. We're drawing people to town, so I think continuing that. The open houses, I know, just speaking, I don't know, pointing fingers, but we were talking about the usefulness of the open houses, and maybe being an extra draw, just that the school system is so open and inviting to potential residents of town that are thinking of moving their families here for our school system. So continuing those efforts is going to be important. And then I think also, as was mentioned, continuing the effort of making sure that our school provides the best education for the students in an efficient manner. Our tax, or the budget increases in the last few years have been kept, I think, lower in the schools, but keeping a stable plan in mind, making sure we have long-term facilities plans so there's no large tax increases that may scare people away. Keep us as one of the lowest mill rates in the area. It will also help draw families in.
Can we have you restate the question?
Happy to do so. The question, Suzanne, is what should our school district be doing to address the challenges of declining enrollment?
Bringing more people to town. No, I mean, the challenging thing, towns around us have more declining populations than we do. I think if you look at Valley Region 4, maybe Westbrook and say other towns, we're fortunate. It has worked out well in our favor. But we, again, have to continue to have the long-term plans, lay information out for people so they are confident in the future of the school district and of the town. We have these fixed assets that are sitting here. We know they're going to have to be spending on HVAC and other things. If there's $10 million that we need to be spending or planning to be spending and bonding for, we should be laying that out now and talking about that openly and positively, not to surprise people, because we're all going to get surprised by tolls or something like that around us. We are not in a bubble or in a vacuum with our school budget or our school programs. I think that we have to continue to excel and provide opportunities for our students and families. Things will draw people into the community, partnering with other organizations. We're fortunate to have LYSB and all the programs that it does provide. And it's going to be a challenge for this whole region. It's a reality, and we're going to have to address it and maybe not spend as much money on some things, and maybe we see a flat budget or try to seek that in coming years. That may be the responsible thing to do. We have to look at that and figure that out, because the school budget is not in a vacuum.
I think that the problem with enrollment declining is, it's declining, but it's not dropping off the cliff. However, statewide, people are leaving Connecticut because of, in my opinion, excessive taxing. And it's difficult to earn a living here, start a business here, which tends to send people away. However, that's beyond the control of the school board. And coming from New York, where everybody's a little bit more happy to be bragging and patting themselves on the back, New England, it doesn't do that. And I think that we need to get better about tactfully advertising our assets. I think this school has a lot to offer. I certainly think it's a top draw for the town, and we just need to be more comfortable bragging about it and advertising our achievements. There's Technotics is the robotics team that competes statewide with other schools. It started a couple weeks ago. It's a great way for team building, for children to learn leadership, and to finding a role within the team and working with others. That's great leadership schools. But again, we need to talk about it without feeling like we're, I don't know what the word is, advertising ourselves, right? I think we need to share with others how great it is here and let them find their way to us.
Thank you. One thing I want to just point out is that we are stable with our enrollment right now. We have 12 tuition students in the district right now. We are constantly encouraging more, getting inquiries. I think that since the marketing campaign, which started about 6 years ago, we have seen an increase and we have seen numbers become stable. So when you think about with the town, a decline in enrollment, when you have a decline in enrollment, it doesn't necessarily mean that 20 ninth graders left, so you can eliminate one ninth grade homeroom. It's not that neat, so we have to be careful that we're not eliminating programs or classes. We live in an amazing town that can have music theory classes and all engineering classes and something for everyone, no matter how many students are in the class. And we still keep the classes very small. I do agree with Mr. Wilson. I think publicizing or sharing more of our sports achievements, the robotics achievements, our drama, musical programs, field trips that they're getting ready to take. And I will just say that there is a lot of information available, and if anyone wants to, I clicked a couple things today and found all the minutes from the meeting that we went to in October, and there is a detailed, I have to just go click on the minutes from last meeting.
Thank you, Sarah. The next question, based on the response, I'm going to try to modify it a little bit because it's related to the last question. I guess we're going to start with you, Suzanne. Correct. And it says as follows, and I'll tell you what my modification for this. The Region 18 School District has been pursuing a marketing project to retain or increase the district student population. What are your views on this project? And I think it would be helpful if you expressed your views both on the concept of a marketing campaign and on the cost associated with that.
So I think marketing is appropriate. If you've been doing something for 6 years, there's some time to do a little bit of market research testing to see how well it's going. You may be drawing in people, but again, we're branding ourselves in the process, and it may be time to freshen it up a little bit. I would think that neighboring towns are kind of like catching on and probably doing a little bit of the same too. Maybe not encouraging people to come in and pay tuition as much, but trying to step up their game. I mean, East Lyme is very proud of its schools, and certainly so is Waterford. So I don't have a problem with marketing and advertising from that standpoint. I still think it's important that our students all feel like that everybody is in the same school and everybody is together, and that everybody has similar same opportunities. So I want to be very cautious with that. I don't think we're trying to make our school district open for marketing to international students, say something like that. I had an exchange student living with her family back in 2006 and 2007, totally free situation. They don't do those programs anymore. It's a wonderful cultural experience for our family and for the school district. Opportunities like that are wonderful, but our schools are for our town and our community and our children. So we want to make sure that it's a good fit for the people who live here.
So, as I said earlier, I would like to see us advertise a little bit more. This town is a beautiful place to live, and if we're looking to advertise the quality of the school, we need to let people know that this is it's a place worth moving to, as I just did. And we live in a microclimate here. We have the Connecticut River and the Sound on all corners. This is an artist community. It's a beautiful place. As Sarah said, the school offers options for students of all different interests, whether it be art or military or shop or sports. It's worth the move, and I think that we can't assume that people will know that if they haven't been here, because let's face it, when you're heading on 95 east or west, people see Old Saybrook, a bridge, and then Mystic. And we really are a little bit hidden, which is the reason that I love it here. But there are other people who would love that idea too, who won't hear about it because we don't do any advertising. A friend of mine, turns out, went to my high school, lives here, and I asked him, I said, there's so many people, I grew up in Stony Brook on Long Island, there's so many people here from Stony Brook, what is the draw? And he said, it's like Stony Brook was 40 years ago, before it got ruined with strip malls and traffic lights and congestion. And that's why it's beautiful here. And I think that we need to integrate not only the school, but also the town and the environment here to draw in more people.
Thank you. So I work in London, and I work with many people who have students in all different districts. I have heard time and time again, I wish my district had schools like Old Lyme. I wish, I'm not going to say what districts they are, I wish we had this offering. I wish we had this, asking me questions. And I say, come check it out. We do have to advertise. If you want to keep Old Lyme schools or Region 18 schools, Lyme-Old Lyme, our town schools, we need to encourage people to move here. The only way to encourage people to move here is to get out how good we are and to advertise or broadcast, maybe a better word, share than advertise, how good we are, what we have to offer. I do think that the marketing campaign of a public school and a private school setting, I get that backwards, I'm nervous, sorry, is effective. And I think that we send kids to our people in town that I'm very good friends with have sent their children to Williams School for much more than tuition-based here. There's St. Bernard's, there's Xavier and Mercy. I think we need to stay in that advertising in order to keep our numbers where we need them, in order to continue the offerings, and to be able to keep the kids of our town engaged with what they have.
Thank you. I agree. I think the marketing campaign is necessary, and I think it seems to be working. I definitely, though, enjoy, perhaps as part of the communication subcommittee, being able to take a look and offer some ideas if it freshen it up or something like that. But I think that all forms of marketing us, maybe even working with the town in some sort of joint effort might be a good idea as well. As Mr. Wilson was indicating, there's a lot of beautiful attributes to the town as well as the schools, perhaps a joint campaign. But also making sure that we do point out, we have a crew team. I remember a few years ago when they went to nationals, it was one of the only public schools I saw on the list that was going. All the rest were private schools. That's pretty exceptional for a public school. And so I think advertising as a private school in a public school setting certainly seems like a legitimate approach. And in some ways, I think a lot of these families that are maybe doing the tuition paying of up to $20,000 a year for their student to come here are probably likely to move into town at some point too. I think it will, even for those students, draw more residents into town. So I think it is an effective approach.
Thank you. Steve, I think you're up next. And the next question has had both pro and con suggestions on social media, so it's very timely. The question, Steve, is this: do you support artificial turf fields in Lyme-Old Lyme, and why?
Well, that is a hot topic from what I gather. From what I understand, I was at the last Board of Education meeting where it was discussed, and I think that they're taking a step forward. I think they have an approved budget, correct me if I'm wrong, and they're going to study the different options, one of which is crumbled rubber. My children used to go to athletics at Chelsea Field, which is indoor artificial turf, and they came home covered in dirt, black dirt, on their ankles and around their faces. And I was concerned that they're aspirating and ingesting all this rubber. I read a study about it, which I should have quoted, but I didn't, that says that there's no health risks of this rubber, which was a great relief to me. So, and I know that the maintenance costs are lower with artificial turf. I know there's expense involved with installing it. I know that it's sort of the way that schools are building fields now, because of the high traffic, that it's maybe an economical choice to do it. To answer your question, my opinion about it is that I want to know more about it. I want to study it. I want to see what the value is, and I I want to know that the money is being spent well and not being wasted, is really my perspective on it. As it stands right now, I don't have an opinion for it or against it, but I am very curious about it.
I do have an opinion. I think their turf field for the town of Old Lyme, Region 18 is necessary and important in the future. I say that as a parent of a competitive lacrosse player, when the teams, and I'm sure soccer and boys lacrosse see the same thing, when the girls lacrosse team goes to towns like Guilford, Brantford, and play on turf, there is severe disadvantage. It is a different game, it's a faster game. I think that they're necessary. That being said, I do not have any agenda with this as my lacrosse playing child will be graduating. So I think for future generations, future students, I think it's important. Hearing the chatter about pro-turf, anti-turf on the sidelines was one of the reasons that I wanted to get involved in this to find out more. Everyone has their rumors and likes to talk about what they think is happening. It's easy to find information when you want to try it. If you really are curious and want to know where we are, where the board is, I was at the meeting as well, and they were discussing the steps that they are taking. And part of the issue with the turf fields is water. Our town, our school system, and Lime Street are on a well. We can't water our fields effectively. A turf field does not need to be watered. These are things that the public can find out, I think are important to know, and for our athletes is important to make them competitive.
I wouldn't want to commit either way at this point. I think I would want to learn, and I think background, as I talked about, I would be able to really examine the information that there is. My understanding is that turf fields are something that have been discussed for several years now. I have reviewed the recommendations of the ad hoc committee that involved many members of the school system and even other residents of town not affiliated with the schools that really took a look at the irrigation and water needs and the athletic field needs of the town and made that recommendation for a turf field that would cover where the current practice field behind the high school is located. I know that turf fields are something that are commonly found at high schools throughout Connecticut as well as at colleges. The oldest child in my household, my oldest stepdaughter, recently went to college to try a little bit of softball. That was a turf field, certainly not uncommon. But that being said, I know a lot of people have safety concerns. There's a variety of materials that I'm reading about that are available. My understanding is before any commitments would be made, that there would be presentations that all residents would be able to come and examine samples of the material that would be used. And I think that that would be a process I would certainly encourage as a member of the Board of Education to make sure that all that information is presented and goes to the public. Thank you.
I have found this a fascinating topic to watch, considering that I have a 6-year-old or 6th grader who I expect to be a soccer prodigy in a few years. And of course I plan for her to play in the World Cup, but I want to make sure she has the knees to do that. So I care about this, and this is right at the right time. We're trying to figure this out. But what to me this whole discussion has been about has been symptoms of people don't feel comfortable in the town of knowing and understanding how money is budgeted and set aside for things, and they didn't feel like they were engaged in a discussion, a philosophical one, and yet they hear that there might be enough money there for something to happen that they didn't know about. So yes, we have to back up and go, okay, we have a problem, we don't have enough playing fields in this town. How are we going to achieve that? Number 2, how are we going to have an open and transparent process so people can discuss this? We can all become rubber crumb experts or not. We're not going to have rubber crumb here. But it is a question that we have to sit and look at the trade-offs and what we can afford as a district and what are the benefits of it. Do we need to have the fields so they will excel better in sports or not? There's always emerging science on this. We have to pay attention to sports medicine as well as the environmental side on it. I go over to East Lyme, I'm out on their field, I walk back in with the security guards, I was doing some environmental class things there, and we all have little green fragments all over our clothes, and they said, yeah, it's all over our house. We can't stand this stuff all the time. We're on our second field. So I'm like, before we spend a lot of money on this, let's get out of silos and see what other towns are doing, have done, and learn from it.
Thank you, Suzanne. The next question is also a facilities question, so it would be helpful if your responses perhaps did not address turf fields. And the question reads as follows. In terms of facilities projects, which projects do you think should be under consideration, and how would you prioritize them? And I think we're starting with Sarah.
Yes, thank you. I think that I really want to address turf fields. Just say that it's in the process, and all the things that Suzanne is looking for are happening in the Board of Ed meetings. Okay, facilities, things coming up. We have 25-year-old buildings that have old equipment in them. The high school has newer equipment since it was redone. However, the other three buildings, Lyme Consolidated, Meadow Creek, and the middle school, as well as Center School and the preschool, are concerned. As any homeowner would do, it is more financially responsible to stay on top of your upkeep than wait for an emergency. These are the kind of things that the Board of Education in their long-term planning for facilities is looking at. And I would, on facilities, given the chance, be a part of making some of those decisions to make sure that the upkeep of these buildings is such that our students are safe, that we're not going to be caught in an expensive emergency at the last minute and be blindsided by it, just like any responsible homeowner would do. The Board of Education has the responsibility to make sure our children are in a safe environment.
I believe the question was both which project would I believe is most under consideration, or should be most under consideration. I'm not sure I know the specific project. Oh, sorry, yeah, maybe I should ask the question.
Jason, why don't I reread it? In terms of facilities projects, which projects do you think should be under consideration, and how would you prioritize them?
I think regular facilities upkeep is an extremely important part of the Board of Education role, working with the superintendent. I am aware that in the past in this town, there have been gaps of years where regular maintenance wasn't done on the buildings, and that leads to much more expensive problems down the road with no money to cover it, and large tax increases potentially. So I think it's good that the town does have currently a 5-year facilities plan. I think that's important. I want to take a look at that. There's the contingency fund to cover any smaller emergencies that come up. So that's important. And then as far as prioritizing, because sometimes you're going to have to, I think I would draw on the experience I have, really critically examining issues. Also, in my job, I often have to take a look at the finances of what used to be one household splitting into two in family court, and really take a look at competing budget interests and figure out how people can move forward. I think that is a critical skill that would really benefit me in taking a look at competing important interests and making sure that the health and safety of our children is served, as well as of the regular facility needs to save the town going forward.
So if elected to the Board of Education, I would start by looking at what is the 5, 7 to 10-year long-term facilities plans, and what are the priorities and needs already identified. And I'd want to hear from the rest of the board. Do we feel comfortable that everything has been adequately addressed? This is going to be an opportune time with the changing of your facilities. I don't have Mr. Rhodes' title correct, but obviously that's a very important, significant position to be restaffed and refilled. And from the standpoint that this is where we all have budgets, we all have to make trade-offs, we all have to figure out what programs support how many students, the highest number of students, or is what's going to be the cost per student. You're going to have to look at some things like this. You're going to have to look at ways of sharing with other districts perhaps, or, and I don't know what the right buzzword for that is, if it's league teams, I think. We're already doing a portion of that. But it's the kind of thing, I don't mean to sound so grim, but I'm just a practical Midwesterner. And I want to look at things and understand that we quantify them and then we openly communicate about what's at stake on things and continue to keep the necessary reserves and have them available when they are needed for things. So again, it's back to open trust, communications. And again, the information may be there for people, but I think we have to lead them to it sometimes, make it make sense.
As Sarah said, as a homeowner, you need to take care of the skeleton and the infrastructure first, and worry about the paint on the outside of the house second, which actually could be weatherproof, but that's a terrible example. But the point is, you need to make sure that you have strong bones before you worry about how fancy your place looks. So I think that our priority has to be health and safety first, of course, making sure that the children have a healthy environment to learn. In technology, we talk about having one throat to choke, meaning that you always want to have one central consultant being responsible for all the subcontractors, so that you have one person to fire if things go wrong. We can't do that here. We have to work with each other. We have to make it work the best that we can. So we have to make our decisions together. I think we need to involve the faculty and the admin and the teachers in our decisions. We certainly want to hear from the community. We want to do a real competitive bid process. I think that we should give every local business, every local contractor, every chance to compete with out-of-town people. I think they should be invested in the community. I think we should build our local businesses wherever possible and have it be a fair process where there's no favoritism being played, but giving local businesses a fair chance to compete. And again, we should rely heavily on feedback from the people who are living there, the students, the teachers, and the faculty.
Thanks, Steve. I should add, as we pointed out earlier, there are two candidates that were not able to be with us this evening. I'm sure that if you check out the Republican Town Committee and Democratic Town Committee websites, you'll probably see their positions on various issues, and that may help educate you when you decide to vote next Tuesday. The next two questions are budgetary questions, and who's up next? Jason? Okay. Jason, the question is, are there specific areas of the school budget that you feel could be reduced? If so, explain.
Like I mentioned earlier, I have been impressed with the school boards in the past few years, and really, as well as the superintendent, of course, and really budgeting efficiently, effectively. Not, it's kind of a hard question because half of it was explained. I'd say nothing that I'm aware of that there's available just to slash. I do think that it's important to have an efficient budget that keeps in mind the needs of all the residents of the town. There are people, that don't have children in the school, that perhaps are living on a fixed income budget, making ends meet. It's important not to have any sharp increases in the school budget, which is a major portion of the town's budget overall. So going forward, I certainly think I can keep a sharp eye on making sure that we appropriately plan and budget in a way that meets the needs of our children, that meets the needs of our children without harming the interests of everyone in town.
Okay, to be totally honest with you guys, I don't know. I have not studied that budget that closely in the past go-around. What I did notice, though, and what I felt, was that as the preschool decision was being presented, that people didn't understand where and how money was being spent for things. And they were worrying, and rumors were around about what programs were being taken away, or what was being fixed or not going to be fixed, or what future hidden costs were going to arise. So math is not my favorite subject. I want to do policy and communications, not the budget, but that's where it comes down to. This has to make sense to us as a community. This has to be open and transparent, and longer term horizons of how do we handle the fixed costs we do have, how do we have the variable costs which fluctuate with the students. So I have not studied that, I will admit, and give my time back.
Okay, so I have a copy of the budget with me that I've started studying and trying to make sense of. And it reminds me of my belabored move here. We've lived here for 15 years. We moved here full-time in June. We've consolidated 2 households into one. Clearly there's excess. There's also a lot of stuff that has accumulated over years of living here that seemed essential 6 months ago and today seems unnecessary. And what's interesting is the way that I'm seeing it as waste as opposed to essential. So I think that having fresh eyes by any of us who are candidates, looking at the way the money is being spent and the way resources are being funded is a good way of saying this may not be necessary. And it's not going to be cutting art, for example, or cutting shop, for example. It's going to be clearing the waste of all these different departments, wherever it is, because sometimes we have a budget, we spend it or we lose it, and we end up just 2% a year. It gets more and more expensive. That we're buying things that we don't need. We're spending money in ways that we don't need to. That's not benefiting the students. It's not benefiting the teachers. It's not benefiting the town. And I think if we look at it as though it's our money, we'll see it differently and get rid of the unnecessary fluff that's everywhere, the chaff, so to speak, and sort of clean up everything and make it leaner rather than cutting off arms and legs.
Happy to, Sarah. Are there specific areas of the school budget that you feel could be reduced? If so, explain.
I will also admit that I have the budget in front of me and I have looked at it and I have studied it, but until I'm on the board, hopefully, I will not fully understand it. I am a prosecutor. I am not a numbers person. I want to understand what all of these numbers go to and if there is any excess or chaff, but I don't know that there is. I know that our Board of Education up to this point has been very, very frugal with the decisions that have been made in implementing this budget. I know that also in part of what the Board of Education has done up to this point, and one thing that I have been super impressed with about learning as we've been going along is there are 5-year plans that plan out for different projects in the future. At the same time, bonds are done so that that extra money is there and we're not having to ask the town taxpayers for more money for these projects. So I don't know, I don't have a specific answer, and I think that so far what the board has been doing in their planning and their strategy has been effective.
Thank you, Sarah. The next question is also a budgetary question, much to your all chagrin, but it's more programmatic in nature. And I'll read it to you. It's as follows. What one new program or service would you like to see added to the budget? Suzanne, I think you're up.
Okay. Before I do that, I'm going to read to you the CABE requirements of what school board members do. We do not get to micromanage or cherry pick anything. We provide oversight and guidance. So, my own personal pet project, I'm not sure. Again, what I want to make sure is our children, our youth in this bubble of a town where we have so much, I want to make sure that they see the rest of the world and they understand where they fit in it and some of their responsibilities and obligations to the rest of society. And I just don't want them to be so protected all the time and thinking that everybody else has what we have here. We need to see what life is like, and we need to help prepare our young people for this. So I don't know some ways to do that. I don't know which widget I want, or which technology or thing I want. I want to provide that experience for them.
Would you repeat the question, please?
Sure, Steve. Again, it's programmatic in nature. What one new program or service would you like to see added to the budget?
Okay, I'm going to echo Suzanne's answer a little bit. My children came from New York City schools, and two of the programs that they did there that I haven't seen here, which doesn't mean they don't exist, but were sort of almost central to their education, was international travel and community service, which are sort of at opposite ends of the spectrum. One is local and one is not. But I'm not a big traveler, I don't like to travel, but both children have been to many countries in the world and have learned perspective about our country, our society, and our world. And by serving local communities, now it's easier in Manhattan because there was a nursing home that was on the same block as their school, so they would just walk that block and once a week help feed the people there and read to them and spend time with them. As my daughter said, we go there to care for people who can't manage for themselves. And it gave her recognition for how well off she was, and also learning the compassion for others who are different than she. So I think those are two sort of very soft topics that really don't directly lead to education, but they certainly give you purpose as how to apply your education later. That you realize that there's a world out there that is different than you, and you need to appreciate it and to work to serve them to the best of your ability with all that you have going for you.
One new program or service that I would like to implement, I think, is specifically beyond the Board of Education's role, would be beyond my role as a member of the Board of Education, talking and collaborating with the board if there are any plans or service programs that we want to be implemented, and having a discussion about them is how the board would operate. I do just want to comment on travel and the students of Lyme-Old. In the past years, our students have gone to, within the United States, have gone to Hawaii. There's a group traveling to Spain this year. There was a group traveling to Paris, but then unfortunate incidents occurred and they were not able to go. The music program, all of them, which comprises a large number of the high school, are going to New Orleans in March, I believe. They're trying to get a plan to go to Italy next year. So they are trying to, and I think successfully, getting our children to see the world. In addition, Old Lyme isn't the world. I think it's up to parents, not necessarily the school system, to help address those issues. OISB is here for the students to gain help through service. There are other, I ran out of time.
Thank you. I don't have a particular program or service in mind right now. I think it's important not to come onto the Board of Education with a particular agenda or a goal. I want to come on and I want to listen to what it is that the community is interested in, and what the schools system and the various administrators there, the teachers there, think might be a good idea or something to try out. And as I mentioned before, I think I would be good at being able to listen to people, communicate with people, make sure everybody is on the same page, and make a decision with the rest of the board and the school system about what would be important. I think I'd like to point out, I think I should be elected solely on this thing, but I have a young child, and I think I'd be the only board member, board candidate that does have a child that's going to be in the elementary school system. I think that, as well as the children in the middle and high school. So I think that gives me a perspective as well of what younger parents or parents of younger children are interested in. And as I said, I'd really be interested in communicating and listening to what people are interested in, rather than coming out with something particular that I'm looking to do.
Thank you, Jason. The next several questions are actually unrelated and interesting. And we're starting with Steve, is it?
Yes.
Okay. Steve, Region 18 does not have school social workers or a drug and alcohol counselor like many area school systems. What is needed to meet the mental health needs of our students?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, coming from Manhattan, I mean, drugs and alcohol and mental illness are part of everybody's household, unfortunately. And, you know, most people have outside help to deal with that. You know, I certainly think that's a worthwhile topic that the school should address. I think there should be at least, you know, maybe not an MD but certainly, you know, a PhD psychologist that is equipped to help children understand this. There should certainly be in-school training, which I would be surprised if there wasn't a curriculum that helps them at least learn about this. I know my son is talking about psychology already. You know, he gets educated about drugs and alcohol at home because my father was a recovering alcoholic, and it's a constant topic for us because I'm concerned that, you know, there's maybe an hereditary issue with that. But I think it's important. I mean, that's a part of your educational health is to be equipped for that, and I think there should be facilities in the school that help them deal with that, or, you know, at least some sort of direction outside the school to help them with that. Of course, half the time nobody knows there's a problem until it's a very serious one, but they should be, you know, educated beforehand. You know, people with vaping and how dangerous that has turned out to be. I think that should be a part of the curriculum.
As a board member of the Lyme Youth Services Bureau, I am proud to say the work that the board and the agency does is amazing. They act as the school social workers, the school counselors, the school, they bring in the therapy dogs with the assistance of the Tim Buckley Project. They have fulfilled this role and fulfilled it in amazing fashion. They address and have addressed in programs both in school that the students have to go to, the issues of social media. They've had Wellness Day where the students could sign up for different either yoga, essential oils, exercise, different things for their mental health and wellness. They offer programs at night for the parents to come out and educate themselves on the issues of the drugs and alcohol and other issues in town. And I will say, having now a freshman and a junior, having discussions with them about the vaping problem 2 years ago, and I know by being on the board, the efforts LYSB has done to educate the public and to intervene with students. There is less of that in the school. It is less readily apparent. I'm sure it still happens, but it is not as obvious and blatant, and I think that is attributable to the LYSB. I'm proud to serve on that board, and I hope that I get to take some of that information that I have and work on the Board of Education.
I was surprised to hear the premise of the question being that there is no school social worker. I thought Ms. Molnaro was, but perhaps I'm wrong, in the middle school. But either way, I think that that's a topic, our school's mental health, our children's mental health and our children's exposure to substances and ability to be strong and stay away from illicit substances is something we can always do more on. I'm going to echo what Sarah said about LYSB and Lyme Youth Services. does such an excellent job in this community. There's the Youth Advisory Board that draws students in, so that they have a role in shaping what sort of curriculum there is in prevention. So I would certainly encourage that to continue. I think with social media is something that we do need more on. It's a very difficult topic in general, as many of you are probably aware. It's hard to keep up. I think it's hard for staff to keep up, so that's something I would encourage ongoing professional development for the teachers and for the school board as well, if I'm on the school board. But I think we can always do more, but I think that there is a lot going on at the moment. Thank you.
So my experience of having children going through the preschool as well as elementary, now middle school, and in high school, we do have school psychologists and school staff. We have the counselors, Ms. Molnar at the middle school. We also have at the high school level. And certainly my experience of being on the LYSB board as well for 6 years, I went off the board about 2 or 3 years ago, was I see it as an integral part of what is going on in helping with the schools. Let's face it, our communities have received continued grants that other communities haven't because of past high alcohol consumption, and that's probably moved on in to vaping and drugs. The whole vaping situation is endemic across the country, and it's a sad situation. But I think that we are working as a community with the social services that we do have with LYSB. Again, the good news, bad news, we have the grants, we receive the support. We have, I think it's called REACH now, the youth program at the high school level. We have a number of t-shirts in our house from CASFI or REACH or other organizations. These are good things that are involving our youth and our families. And I think our community jumped on this earlier than a lot of others. Our school did. The kids will still tell you that us adults were at least 6 to 9 months behind the kids, but we addressed it a year earlier than a lot of other schools did when it came to a lot of the vaping. But this is something you have to continue to be diligent on.
Thanks, Suzanne. Sarah, I think you're fortunate to receive the longest question of the night, and I would encourage the other candidates who are not named Sarah to take notes. The question reads as follows. Earlier this year, there were several proposals to regionalize school districts. All of these proposals were defeated, but are still supported by several key legislators, like the Senate Majority Leader, who have vowed to continue this conversation. Would you be open to conversations to further regionalize? If so, why? If not, what would you do to oppose forced regionalization if proposed again?
I can answer part of that. And no, I would not support forced regionalization of our schools. I think that I believe that Lyme-Old has its own character, and we are a great regional school district with many things to offer. As to what to do if the legislature or proponents try to force this, I don't know. And that is something that I would ask my first select woman and other select people in the Democratic Party and in town what their policies or what their thoughts on the issue are. I don't think that it's right. I would need to learn more about it. I would need to ask questions. And certainly if it did come up again, that's what I would do. But I do feel at this point that our regional school system under Mr. DeViser is doing well and should remain as it is.
Thank you. As I indicated, I'm always open to learning more, but no, I really don't support the regionalization plans that I heard of this past year. I mean, I know we have a small school system, but we make a lot of efforts to cooperate with neighboring towns as we need to. We have a football program with the Valley Regional. We have swim team, hockey team, and a variety of other, and for before high school, excuse me. I know we have cheer with the East Lyme rec department, because we don't have enough people for cheer here in town. So we share where we can. With the budget, I know we've become part of a consortium for of other small towns for the healthcare costs for staff in schools, because that's such a major expense. So I'm open to looking into ways that we can cooperate with other towns, but I don't think that the state should be forcing us to combine with other towns, like ridiculous bus routes you have if you combine schools, and just I do think we need local control. As for how to oppose it, because I know I don't have a lot of time, lobbying is important. I think a lot of that was done. We're a member, as most schools are, of the United Association of Boards of Education, CABE, that Suzanne mentioned earlier. So many schools were against it. They lobbied heavily, and I think helped defeat that.
So this is a topic near and dear to me because I was already writing letters to Paul Formica, Devin Carney, and I thought Norm Nidelman should hear from me anyway, even though he represents Lyme, Lyme-Old Lyme, in opposing regionalization of schools and pointing out the shared services efforts that were going on by the schools in our region. This issue, Governor Lamont has said he's not going to take it on right now, but it's not going away. We're going to have to realize again, the school districts that run themselves well and do well, we have to protect our reserves, and we don't receive a lot of money from the state anyway. So I'm already an active, engaged citizen. You can call me a lobbyist. I'm just speaking my mind as a citizen and a voter, and I will continue to do that. Hats off to Tina Gilbert of Lyme, who got us all aware of this and stepped up early on and said, pay attention to this and weigh in on this. This is where I think we need to have eyes in the back of our heads as well, and we need to work as a Board of Education to help unite the community and speak up on things like this. So I'm ready. I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing and what I've been saying, because I don't think regionalization as it's being forced upon us is going to work at all.
You didn't go in the last, did you get to use all your other candidates' answers? But I largely agree with everything that they've said. I believe that forced regionalization is not the same thing as cooperating with other schools in the area. No school in this area within 20-mile radius is an island, and I think that we need to work together, cooperate as much as possible. I don't like the idea of governance from afar. I don't think that it does anybody any good. I think that it's a way of sort of losing your road feel, so to speak. I think that being local, living with the school, living in the community, helps you know what's best for the school and for the students especially. And once you're governing from Hartford or wherever it is that they want to do this, you've lost touch with the school. You want to homogenize it to make it like all the other schools. And the draw to this town, again, is our school system. I think that the current board is doing a great job. I think the school is doing a great job. And I wouldn't want to dilute that by having us be like Groton or Guilford or Madison. We should be Old Lyme, and I think that we should keep it to suit our community. What I would do to fight it is I would do whatever it takes. I don't like the idea of governance from afar, and I would resist it.
Thank you, Steve. And Mary tells me we have time for one more question. But Suzanne, it's an interesting question. And Jason, you're up first? Okay. Later school start times have been approved in California and are under active discussion in other states. What are your views on delaying school start times to accommodate adolescents' need for more sleep?
It's definitely something I've heard of. I think it's an interesting idea. If that was something that became an issue in town that people were asking for, I'd certainly be willing to learn more about it. I haven't heard it as something that's been mentioned much in town. I know even when I was growing up, people were talking about high school students don't get enough sleep. So that's certainly interesting, but I know that there's the competing interest of being able to have enough time after school to have high school athletics and the other activities that happen, and enough time to do homework that, you know, while it's something that's been batted around as an idea for decades, I think there's a reason it hasn't really caught on. But again, I'd certainly be interested if that was something that people in town started expressing to the Board of Education was something that they were interested in looking at. I'd be more than happy to look more at it. Thank you.
Okay, Jason, wait till your little kids get older and sleep in the morning. I'd have to say, land of steady habits in Connecticut, it would probably be too disruptive to try something like that. But it's certainly interesting to be considered. I have a high school junior and now a 6th grader, so they want to sleep in later. They're exhausted. But it would be tough to figure out something like that from a scheduling standpoint. But I'm more concerned that we make sure that we're not just chasing our kids on the road to nowhere and they're exhausted from doing too much homework or too many activities. They do need to get a certain number of hours of sleep a day. And I don't think I'm seeing that in our schools, that they are just totally exhausted, but wait till SAT tests are coming. I'll let you know in the junior year. It's a tough year, your junior year, as I'm learning and appreciating, probably are too. So we need to pay attention to things that can improve the experience for our children and be open to change in Connecticut.
I think using California as an example of what to do is a terrible idea. Just to say that very flatly, it's a great place to live, and they've ruined it. I mean, half the homeless people in the U.S. are in California. The citizens are leaving in droves to go to places where they're supporting themselves as opposed to supporting this terrible welfare state. I can't say enough bad about it. I would not follow California's lead. Benjamin Franklin said, "Early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise," and that is very true. I wake up at 6. My children get up at 6:30. They go to school at 7:20 to 7:40, depending. And it's all about discipline and learning to set your time and your hours and control your life and not let others control it. This idea of letting them get in later doesn't do anybody any good. It just makes it easier for them to keep bad habits, I think. It's a dad joke about a guy running into his friend and he says, "Oh yeah, I was up at 6 this morning." He's like, "Really? I wish I could sleep in on weekdays." There's nothing wrong with getting up at dawn. Discipline is important for success for the rest of your life. And also the start time of schools is convenient for parents who are present parents and work for a living, so they can get their children off to school with breakfast, talk to them in the morning, send them to school, and then get to work on time themselves. So I don't think that having a conflicting start time is good for the family.
I have to make a joke about talking to your children in the morning as I look at my 16-year-old daughter. I do not think, personally, I do not think changing the school start time is realistic or important. Our children need sleep, yes, but they also need to learn how to budget their time. And it's the parents' role to supervise and make sure that they're not over committing themselves and they are getting that sleep. As a Board of Education member, if this came up, I would certainly ask questions. I would talk to the board, and I would be open to listening to other opinions, and hopefully we would come to an agreement as to what the correct answer is for our town. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. We've reached the portion of our program where we'll move on to closing remarks. Before doing so, I should just advise those present and those online, who obviously know this, that this event will be broadcast on Comcast Public Access Channel 14 at 7:30 p.m. on November 1, 2, 3, and 4, before you go to the polls on Tuesday, November 5th, to vote for up to 3 of these very fine 6 candidates. And as with the initial question, Suzanne, you get to go first with the closing, and you have 2.5 minutes to do so.
This is beginning to feel like homework, guys. I want to thank you for coming and sticking through with us, submitting all of these questions, giving us an opportunity to help you get to know us and our perspective and why we're interested in serving on this board of 9 people. And as you realize, a 9-member board, we are not supposed to be micromanagers. We are not supposed to be people doing the day-to-day work. That's the superintendent and that's the staff. And we are in a position to provide guidance to them and oversight. Ask the tough questions, and I think you've seen the ability to ask some pretty tough questions here on the stage this evening. But the point is that somebody serving on the school board needs to work in unison as a group once a decision is made. And we need to figure out how we can solicit input from the community, make sure we are listening, paying attention, and factoring in what people are saying, and then coming up with decisions. But I also look forward to the opportunity to help keep the community engaged, try to tamper down some of the mistrust or a feeling of not knowing what's going on. Again, the information may be there. We all lead busy lives. I think it's a challenge for any organization and a responsibility when we're governing other people's, spending other people's money, your money, allocating it for things, to figure out how to present it in a way that's meaningful, that makes sense, that gets to the core of the questions that you do have. I would welcome the opportunity to work with my peers on a board of education. I think the years of experience that I have, the age and the stage of my children in school would be a good mix in the board. I also want to encourage you to take a look at our Row B candidates, because I think that we do provide certainly an insightful perspective from our New York resident here who's moved here full time. But you need people who can ask the tough questions and have the knowledge base behind to do that. And our panel represents a good mix and a blend of the Row B candidates of that in different fields and different areas. So I would be delighted to serve on the Board of Education. I would appreciate your vote, and I hope to be able to be in a position to serve you. Thank you.
Again, echoing what Suzanne said, I think that we want to rely upon our experience, our knowledge, and our intellectual curiosity to take what we have that seems to be working so great, ask the questions that potentially can improve what we're doing. My perspective, it's very important to me that we act locally as much as possible. I think it's important to hear the opinions of the community, of the students, of the faculty and admin at the schools, and in all of the schools. I'm sort of focused with high school because that's where my children are, and I've met with some of the people there to get their perspective. But I think it's important not to operate in a bubble. I think we need to have our ears open and our eyes open, and doing what's best ultimately for the students first. I think that all the candidates up here, the ones that I've met outside of here, are all very well qualified, intelligent people. I would be happy to serve with any of them. I think that this town attracts intelligent people who are hardworking and community-minded, which is really a contrast from New York, where it was a little bit self-centered. So I really do love it here, and I think that it's a great place to live, a great place for my children to go to school, and I think that I have a lot to add to the board. I guess, I feel like we're spending, my money is what's being spent. It's not other people's money anymore. This is, I'm investing in my children's education and the children that follow and in the community at large. So I take it personally, and I want to spend it wisely, and I want to look for value. I don't want to, I want to buy value, and I want to make sure that what we invest in lasts and serves a purpose. And again, we're very interested in transparency, accountability, responsibility, and as again Ben Franklin said, that, the people that should vote in America, it used to be just landowners could vote, and while that's no longer fair and reasonable. His point was that you have a vested interest. You're not going anywhere soon. You know, I've been here for 15 years. I live here full time now. This is my home, and I want to do what's best for it. And I believe that everybody up on this panel shares my perspective that we really want to do what's best and what will last and serve the community well for years to come.
Thank you. I believe it's my time, as I mentioned in my opening statement, to step forward and help continue to ensure that the schools, that we build on the amazing educational system that we have here in Region 18. I say to my kids all the time, family first. I'm asking for your vote on the 5th, because not only will I put your families and your children first, I will strive to make our town first. I will try to make decisions for our kids that are both fiscally responsible and have input and are the best interests of our child. We use that statement in the law quite a bit. In my work life, I'm a prosecutor in Lyme-Old. I have often had to take a hard stance on what I believe in to be right. But I also have to be able to ask tough questions and to find out the hard facts of cases. Kind of a work anecdote. When I'm picking a jury or saying a closing argument, I often say, don't leave your common sense home. As a juror, we ask you to use your common sense when deliberating. It seems obvious, right? I will use common sense. I will use common sense to protect our children and the Region 18 schools that I care about so much. I appreciate all of the time that everyone took to submit questions, to come to listen, and to support all of the candidates. I also want to remind you, Board of Education isn't necessarily a partisan issue. Please be thoughtful and use your common sense in choices. That being said, personally I feel that Jason Kemp, Lori Ann, and Panzera Griswold, who unfortunately could not be here tonight, and I have backgrounds we have backgrounds, also history with the schools. I do from kindergarten with my son through the high school. And the three of us have really the desire to make the difference in this town. We are invested, and we look forward to you all coming out to the polls. Thank you again. Well, thank you to the LYSB and Limelight and Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you. Yes, I want to start by saying thank you to LYSB, the Chamber of Commerce, and Limelight for hosting us. I think this is very important. As we've talked about up here, our schools are one of the star points of our town. I think we all agree our children are extremely important to us, and I think it's good that we get to hear from all of us today. I think it's important to note that no matter which of us wins any of the 6, there are no incumbents running this time. So all 3 of the people who you choose on November 5th will be new to the board. So in that respect, I'd like to say that I think I've shown that I'm hard-working, I have a commitment to professional development. My job, professional development, is extremely important. I'm required to do at least 40 hours a year around issues around families and child development and other legal issues. In preparation for this even, just to learn more about what a Board of Education does, I went to training offered by the Community Association of Boards of Education that the superintendent made us all aware of, so we could learn a little bit more about what it is that we're running for. So I think I have the commitment and ability to learn about what it is, to communicate with the members of the community, take that information in, and ultimately make the decisions that are required of us around policy and budget, which are the most important topics that the board does. I'd like to say I believe I'm a patient person, an analytical person, and I think those are traits that will help me on the Board of Education to be able, again, when issues do get heated, or parents become want to know more about what's going on. I think I can help bridge that gap between the board. I didn't get to mention earlier, I wanted to throw out, I certainly want to explain or explore more ways of making sure the community is able to know what's going on, what the board's thinking about discussing maybe more of a summary than just minutes, because minutes can be hard to read, and to recognize. A lot of parents, particularly of young children, it's hard to prioritize coming to the board meetings, but they still want to know what's going on and be able to be involved. So I think that for all those reasons, I'd be a valuable member of the Board of Education. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. As I indicated earlier, there are two additional candidates, Jennifer Miller and Lorianne Panzera Griswold. I have a closing statement from Jen Miller that she asked me to read on her behalf. I want to again thank Limelight and LYSD for pulling this forum together and Attorney Collins for sharing my remarks. The boards of education are such a unique institution. Our board holds such an important place in our town, our character, our standards of excellence for our children, and our financial stability. Anticipating questions around the top two recent issues I have heard throughout the community, my brief thoughts are as follows. 1. The expansion of pre-K is an example of a major board decision where I would have liked to have seen greater community input, greater awareness of the state's direction, as well as the impact on local providers in the measure of success. 2nd, artificial turf. This has been studied for a number of years under the Finance Committee as to how much it will cost to provide a field behind the high school. What hasn't been studied in much depth is the cost and benefit, the impact on our sports programs if we don't install it, or the taxpayers' appetite for paying for this at this time. And thirdly, consistent with both these issues is the fact that very few taxpayers know enough about these discussions to make an informed decision. I had always tried to keep up with the happenings around Old Lyme, especially those which impacted either our mill rate or the character of the town, which we all love. From social media, I became aware of a host of topics, which made me wonder why I did not know anything about them. As I researched more in detail, I was surprised by what was not really public information in such a small town. Taxpayers who have come to board meetings, at least one multiple times, to propose the board address certain topics have never made the agenda. Not everyone can be involved with every decision. Obviously, we empower our board to make good decisions. But as stated in my opening remarks, increasing open, transparent communication with taxpayers about our schools, not just via minutes posted to a website, is critical. And I pledge to you that it will happen if I am on the board. I hope you will look for me on social media and other avenues where I will be sharing my answers to your questions for this election and maintaining an open dialogue with regard to our schools, whether I am successful or not in pursuing a board seat. Thank you. And with that, I would just simply like to thank the candidates this evening, and for those of you who were present last week, we had candidates for the selectmen's races, and I think the one thing that stands out in both of those forums is that we're all truly blessed in this town to have the quality of the candidates that were on the stage last week and tonight. And I would ask that you express that enthusiasm by sharing my enthusiasm by applauding the candidates tonight. And the best part now is we have coffee and socializing with the candidates in the lobby, and with that, you may turn off your microphones. Thank you all for coming tonight.